Hey, this is Chris with Phoenix Gaming. Today we're going to take a deep dive in the Enforcer Specialist units, and we're going to take a look at all of them. And this is going to be formatted just like the previous videos where we look at what I think's good, what I think's bad. But before we do it, we do a general overview of all of them. So, like I said, take a look at those specialist options, how they look at each unit individually, how they could be used, maybe talk about some orders that are good with them, and then as usual, we'll go from best to worst. I didn't make slides for the best to worst. We'll just kind of talk about it once we're done rather than go through a slideshow of it. I figured that would actually work a little bit better. Before we do dump into it. Before we do jump into it, let's do that instead of dumping. If you like Firefight or you've never played and my videos have made you interested in Firefight, make sure you take a look at my Amazon affiliate link in the description. It's for the 2-player battle box. There's also going to be one for command dice. And then if you like the videos, make sure you're hitting like. If you like them, subscribe. That goes a long way to help me make more content. Thank you. And now what we're all here for. So we're going to go in order as they appear in the app before we talk about like how they stack up against each other. So we're going to start with the Enforcer drones. They're 55 points. They come with anti-grav, construct, elusive 2, and evade. And all of this is on a 2 hit point, 5+ armor chassis. And that's for 2 drones. Anti-grav, pretty good. You know, if you're an Enforcer player, you understand how it works. Almost all your stuff has it. Construct is handy. And like I said, when I did the tournament, I'm kind of a goof. Idiot! I forgot they had construct. And to be fair, I don't even think I knew what construct was when I did the Michigan GT. So those things were getting pinned left and right. I didn't know what I was doing. I never used elusive. And I still, even without using construct and without using elusive, I still felt like those were worth their points. You know, elusive is kind of like resilient, but for the hit roll. But what that also means is there's no AP that can shut it off. So if you shoot me with 3 dice and 2 of them succeed, I can use elusive 2 to make you re-roll both those dice in an attempt to get you to try to fail them. And there's no AP threshold that shuts it off like with resilient. So elusive is pretty good. I like it a lot. And now that I remember that my units have it, I've been able to use it a bit more. So it's pretty handy. I like the Accutech shotguns that they come equipped with stock. Their default loadout, short range, it is 12 inches, but it's 3 dice with pinning. And that means they're a great utility unit for just kind of moving up and trying to shut off charge reactions or trying to mitigate your opponent's action economy. You know, if you're playing against a bunch of MSU, as we call them in the Warhammer world, I assume there's probably similar or the same terminology in Firefight. But MSU is like minimum sized units, you know, and that's where people are just taking, well, I only have to take 7 of these rats, so I'm only going to take 7, but I'm going to take a lot of units of them to get like more action economy. And things like the Accutech shotguns, the burst lasers, anything that hands out pin tokens is going to be helpful in mitigating people who are just spamming a bunch of cheap units to get a ton of actions. They do have some options. Really, it's just I believe it's a 3rd drone you can take. And you either get a stealth drone, a mine layer. It may be an upgrade for one of the first 2 drones. I don't remember. But anyway, stealth drone, mine layer, or command drone. Now, the stealth drone gives them stealthy, obviously, which is a -1 to hit. Which, it's not bad. You know, again, it depends on what you expect out of this unit. But stealthy with elusive could be a good stack, because if you're already -1 to hit, an Enforcer unit goes from hitting on 4s to hitting on 5s into these drones, which means every die roll is just a 50-50. So elusive 2 could actually, stacked with stealthy, be worth it. Mine layer is for 5 points. When they are assaulted, they cause 3 automatic hits with AP1 before combat begins, and it counts towards combat resolution. To me, this is the one you take.
I like that.
This thing's awesome. Like, yeah, stealth is good. It'll help keep them on the table. But what I tended to use them for is like charge buffers. Move them up, slap something with a pin token, and just kind of move block things. And if you want to shoot them, fine, they're cheap. You could shoot them, and maybe they die, maybe they don't. But if you want to charge them, now you've got to take these 3 hits, and then couple that with the fact that if they haven't activated, they have evade. So not only do I get to do some 3 AP1 hits to you, I also get to move away from you.
So I'm your daddy now.
The command die is 10 points. It gives 1 black command die. I just don't think that's worth 10 points. And maybe you do, and maybe your list is set up to use it. But my experience is you just have better access to command dice from your commanders. Now, they don't have trademark weapons, so there's not a lot of orders that are going to be beneficial to them. And honestly, you probably don't want to spend a ton of orders or command points on them unless it's very important to what it is you're trying to accomplish in that moment. Like, this is not a unit that I would plan to spend command points on. I'm not looking at this going, well, they're going to need go, go, go every turn or anything like that. They're just cheap. You can move them up. You can throw some pin tokens out. They can screen from things coming out of reserves. So they just have more of a utility feel to them. And this is just breaking down everything I already said. Like I said, the stealth drone's solid. It is armor 5, so they're gonna be less durable. And again, mine layer. I just think the mine layer is the best option here. Your mileage may vary. The stealth is probably the second best, and I don't think it's a big difference. I could make very strong cases for either one, but 10 points for a black command die just feels like a waste of points. Like I said, there's just better things out there that are going to give you command dice, going to give you command points. Now we're going to talk about the Pathfinder monocycles. I love these models, love them. I don't have any yet. They are on my list of models to pick up so I can add them to the pile of shame. They move 12 inches. They sprint 18. They have advanced training, scout, wield, evade, and of course bulky because they can't get in transports. Fast units, they move 12 inches. They do have a pre-game move just like the jet bikes. Really, they're a lot like the jet bikes. They just don't have anti-grav. And they do have sniper rifles as opposed to like the Dominators. But the sniper rifles are AP2 with targeting systems and the sniper scope, so they're not terrible. It is one shot, so you're not getting a ton of volume. But into something like an Enforcer Squad or, where people have like Armor 6, maybe even Armor 7, like some Peacekeepers, and I'm sure there's other units out there. Some of the Forge Father stuff, unfortunately, that's all heavy armor, so maybe the sniper rifles aren't going to feel as good there, simply because you're just like, oh, well, I got a damage, but maybe I didn't, So, but yeah, no, the snipers are going to do really well into more elite builds and elite armies. If you're playing against Plague and they just have a bunch of Leapers and a bunch of Teratons, those sniper rifles are going to feel pretty good. The cloaks give stealthy for 10 points. Again, anytime there's like a Pathfinder unit that has a stealthy option, I just don't even understand why it's an option. And I'm not putting down anybody in any way. I'm just looking at it going, well, to me, I'm just spending the 10 points because they're armor 5 and I don't want them to die and they need to be able to interact with the game. This isn't a unit whose range is, well, this one isn't too bad, but some of them's range isn't so long that they can just outrange things. And, the way the game plays, I'm going to get you eventually anyway. So that stealthy does help kind of keep them on the table a little bit longer. 70 points for 2 of them, and then 30 points for each additional. And I think for the speed and the shooting that they deliver, I think that's a good price. The fact that they have targeting systems is handy. I don't know that I would split fire with them that often. Again, it's a low volume, so you're really pushing your luck when you've only got a handful of models that are shooting one shot each, and you're just like, well, I'll split fire. Yeah, see?
I ain't gonna take any chances. You're hanging around with me, see?
There's a saying in our play group, there's no commitment like overcommitment, and it's true. A lot of times when we split fire in the games that we play, like when we've played 40K in the past, it usually doesn't go the way we think it should, because dice just be dice, homie. I think Go, Go, Go is a fantastic order for this and really anything that moves 12 inches. What that lets you do is, and I'm going to cover this again, I promise, but it lets you move out, shoot, and then move back, right? You can cover 24 inches of ground with that order and a unit like this, and it's just fantastic. Ready for Anything is another great order for them because they do have evade, so you could move, shoot, and go into Overwatch, or you could just steady aim, go into Overwatch, and that steady aim could get important, just because you may need to ignore some modifiers there. The Peacekeeper order is fantastic on them. It gives them way to fire 1, and I believe it's vicious shooting. Sounds right without looking it up. And again, you're going to see a theme with this Peacekeeper order because there's almost no unit in this army that Peacekeeper captain's order isn't good for. You could make the argument that the Assault Commander's order is pretty good. It's 3 extra inches of movement. I don't know that I would need 15 inches of movement. I feel like that's more beneficial on your infantry that moves 6, or things with anti-grav, so you can hop buildings instead of going around them. So I don't know that it's as beneficial to them as it would be to, say, jet bikes. Sniper teams are just a standard Enforcer chassis, armor 6, blah, 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 blah. They do have Marksman, which is reroll hits of 1. They do have Scout, which is the pregame move, and they come with Stealthy stock. And they have 3 models. 2 of them have sniper rifles, and then the Sergeant has the Gendling laser rifle. There's not a lot to say about them. They are just effectively slower versions of the monocycles and just a little bit cheaper. So again, it's not that they're bad, it's not that they're good, it's just that I think they kind of fill the same role just a little bit differently. And there's nothing wrong with either of them. They're both solid takes. They don't have a charge reaction, which is kind of weird. I don't know if that's an error or if that's intentional, but in the app, in the companion app, there's no charge reaction. And I think that's one of 2 Enforcer units that I've seen so far that don't have them, and that's why I'm curious if it's an error and not intentional, but I'll dig into it. We'll find out. All of the orders that benefit the bikes are really going to benefit the snipers, so I'm not going to hash through all of those again. I'd just be saying a lot of the same stuff, so I don't feel like we need to do that. There we go. The jet bikes, and again, standard Enforcer profile, armor 6, 2 hit points. They do move 12. They have elusive 1, scout, and evade. Again, elusive, pretty good. I like it. And then evade, when you remember you have it, is fantastic, especially on things that move 12 inches. Because you can, unless something's really slow, or really fast, like faster than you can force some failed charges, and that's good. They come stock with the Dominator rifles, and I've said this before, I think the Dominators are overall our best utility rifle. It doesn't have access to all the same orders that the Gendling does, but getting 1 additional shot, getting 3 dice, 1 additional shot going to 3 dice, and AP1 just means that you don't have to invest as many command points into them in order for them to be effective. And they're really good into all infantry. There's not a single infantry they're going to feel bad into outside of, again, anything with heavy armor like the Forge Fathers. But they can be effective chip damage into lighter vehicles as well. If your opponent's got, not the jet, but the Bronco or the Mule, the Dominators are going to do some damage to that thing. Just through weight of dice, because those things are only armor 6, so your damage rolls are going to be a 50-50 at AP1. So again, Dominators to me, worth it. If you can bring units with Dominators, those things are awesome. And then you can take 1 jet bike in the unit, and it'll either have a missile launcher or a burst laser, and it just depends on what you expect to get out of that unit. If you bring the missile launcher, you have a missile, which is great for cracking armor. You can throw 1 or 2 missiles from these random units. Like if you've got a couple of shooty Enforcer operative units with missile launchers, and then you've got a bike with missile launcher, you now have 3 different missile launchers on the table, and your opponent has to be wary of them. They have to understand that at any point, one of those AP4 Devastating 2 missiles is going to come down and it's going to do damage. And if it hits a vehicle, the vehicle is getting pinned because they're anti-tank. So again, missile launchers are a great take. They are 20 points if I remember right, so they're kind of expensive, but it gives you that anti-tank threat. And then the burst laser is fantastic crowd control. And that's it. You either take an anti-tank or you take crowd control. Again, the burst laser gives you 4 shots at no AP. They do pin. So it's one of those, again, just like I just said with the other unit, if you hit somebody with that burst laser and they've just got a ton of cheap units everywhere, all those pin tokens are going to add up. Now, if they're spending all their command points at the end of the round to remove pin tokens, that's fine because that's orders they're not giving. And, you know, if they're just leaving the pin tokens, unless they have, I forget what the rule is, but a lot of the plague units have it where they can charge while they're pinned and they get all their pin or charge stuff. I can't think of what the rule is called, but again, unless they have that rule, it's going to really slow down that assault from assaulting armies, and it's going to slow down shooting armies because now they either move or shoot. Slow down. You know, so that those pin markers on all that non-vehicle stuff is really going to be beneficial. Again, the jet bikes, just like the monocycles, they have a lot of orders that they're going to be good with. But again, go, go, go is one of my favorites. With anti-grav, you can pop them from behind terrain. You can shoot. You can pop back behind the terrain. If you need to, you can leap across the table. Like I said, they move 12 inches, so you're clearing 24. And, you know, they can snatch objectives because you can move 12, shoot, move 12, and your sergeant just has to be within 3 inches of the objective, and then the rest of your unit just has to be within 3 inches of the sergeant. So you could really position it in a way where you could move 24 inches and still snatch objectives from your opponent if they're not controlling them, or if you shoot them off and then come take it type of thing. So go, go, go is, and I think I mentioned this in one of the earlier videos, go, go, go is one of the best orders we have. The problem is that it's not one you're going to use every turn. To me, there's orders that you use every turn, and then there's orders that are situationally really good. To me, this is one of the best, but it's only situationally really good. You're not going to need it every turn. The C3M4 combat drone. It's armor 6. It's 5 hit points, so it's fairly standard when taking into account the profiles of like the jets and all of the other kind of aircraft and smaller, lighter vehicles like the Broncos and the Mules. So it's a very similar chassis. It is elusive too, which does improve its resiliency for the lighter vehicles because a lot of the lighter vehicles don't really have that type of stuff. You look at, like the Plague Mule mortar, it doesn't have resilient or anything like that. So having anything to help you keep it on the table, super handy. Now, obviously, any kind of really good melee is still going to be bad news bears for this thing, simply because it doesn't have flying, it's just anti-grav, so anything can charge it. Now, it does have charge reactions, it can evade, and it has controlled fire, so you have some options to figure out how you want to keep it out of combat, but that's going to require making sure you activate it very carefully or make sure it has an Overwatch token. The default loadout is a tag cannon, tag rifle, and tag sensor, and it's a solid loadout. There's nothing wrong with it. The cannon is 4 dice at not AP4, it's AP2. Idiot! The sensor array is good, but the only thing about the sensor array is, and this is what I've noticed about a lot of the Pathfinder units, is as standalone units, they're not great. But if you're leaning into Pathfinders to bring like a Pathfinder force, they can kind of stack up and get pretty spicy. And that's where the sensor array is like, hey, this is actually really good because you can stack that sensor array with some of the stuff you would get from some of the tag and Pathfinder specific orders because the sensor array is not an order. So that's something to keep in mind, is that would stack with some of the other stuff that you already get with the Pathfinders because of the fact that that's not an order. For 10 extra points, you can, instead of taking the tag cannon, take the particle beamer upgrade. It's 3 dice at AP3 with seismic and weight of fire 2. So, and the thing to remember is the tag cannon has marksman and maybe vicious. It definitely has marksman. I forget what else it has, but it has marksman. So you're only rerolling 1s, but with this thing, you're going to be able to just reroll 2 dice, and they're AP3. So you're going to lose a little bit of volume, which is 1 die, but you're going to get to reroll any 2 dice instead of only 1s, and then they're AP3, so you're more likely to damage. So you're going to sacrifice just a touch of volume for a little bit more accuracy and higher AP, and it seems good. Like I would play it, I would give it a try. I don't see anything wrong with the tag cannon, but at the same time, there's nothing wrong with saying I'd rather have the particle beamer. Looking at the missile system, I just don't think they're worth 15 points. Again, I understand that they're gonna clear hordes because it's 3 shots and each shot is blast D4. So, if you spiked, those 3 shots could turn into 12 shots. And sure, that's awesome, but honestly, they're going to average probably only 5 or 6 shots, which isn't terrible. But for 15 points, you're going to average 5 or 6 shots with no AP. They do have anti-aircraft, but a lot of the aircraft I've seen is armor 6, so you're still damaging it on 6s. And just from my perspective, I'd rather just have the 4 consistent dice that reroll 1s baked in of the tag cannon at AP2, because sure, I might be -1 or -2 to hit that aircraft, but I get to reroll any 1s, and if I do get hits through, I'm way more likely to get the damage through. And it's really, to me, what the missile system is you're just throwing a bunch of shit at the wall to see what sticks.
Psych, it's dog poop. It's great.
Overall, it's a solid unit. I feel like it's going to underperform if you don't have Pathfinders in your army that are supported by it, but I feel like it could probably overperform if the list is tailored around it, or maybe 2 of them. The Forward Observer Order, to give it extra range, gives it a 42-inch range particle beamer, that's kind of gross. And the 30-inch range tag cannon is also kind of gross. The tag sensor array going in up to 18 inches is also helpful. Remember, you do need to take the steady aim action, so you wouldn't be able to move if you did that. But if you're over 12 and under 18, it might be worth it. If if that's how you're playing and you have those characters, it might be worth it to use that FO order in order to steady aim, get the extra range, negate some penalties, stuff like that. So again, I think the FO order is pretty good for it. Ready for anything is phenomenal because you can just go into Overwatch. So you can move it up, park it where you need it, shoot the dice you need to shoot, give it Overwatch. You can steady aim it, give it Overwatch. Doesn't matter. It's one of those like that. That's a fantastic order. That is one, again, and I've done the video on it. The orders for this army are just so good. And, that was the biggest, and I'm going to get on a tirade here, a little bit of a tangent. That was one of the biggest things going to the Veerman that I struggled with, was just like, man, these orders kind of suck. And it's not that they're bad, it's just that the Enforcer's orders are that good, And again, Peacekeeper Captain Aura gives it weight of fire and vicious, so it does help make sure your sensors hit, stuff like that. So again, it's just the Peacekeeper Captain Aura, awesome, helps everything, so versatile. Peacekeeper Defenders. This is an interesting unit. I like them. They do get 2 melee attacks at AP1. I kind of wish they had gauntlets, and maybe I'm just being stingy. Excuse me, because I'm like, hey, I play this army, and this army would benefit from better melee. So this would benefit me, So I recognize there might be a little bit of bias there, but I feel like they should have energy gauntlets. I don't know. Maybe they shouldn't. Maybe they should have like a shield bash. I don't know. 2 attacks at AP1 means you're not charging them into most things because they're such a small unit. If you've got a unit of 2, that's 4 attacks. What am I going to do with 4 attacks besides lose an assault? And that's kind of where I'm thinking about it. Now, maybe you could charge them into lighter vehicles, stuff like that, but you definitely don't want to send them into anything with a good melee profile. Not because they will die necessarily, but because they're not likely to win the assault. And if you're not killing your opponent, you still need to win in the assault. And that's, again, I've talked about that. Melee is less, in my mind, about doing damage and more about controlling your opponent's action economy. If they can out-activate me, how can I control that? Well, I can beat them in assaults and shut off units, and if I do kill them, that's even better, because that's less activations they're going to have overall. But if I win the assault, they get a pin token, they get marked as activated, end of story, I don't have to worry about it. So, and even like some of the bigger vehicles, when I played against Forge Fathers, that's kind of how I approached their tank, was I'm just going to send the tunneler into it, I'm going to charge it, I don't have to kill it. I just have to do more damage than it does, and I did, so it got marked as activated, bam, I don't have to worry about that thing shooting at me anymore. And that's really what I had to do with a lot of that stuff in their army, is just, I just need to do more damage than you do to me, because I just need you to not be able to hurt me. And so like my Nightmares, sent them in, killed a few models. They only did a couple damage back because of the anti-tank on the big drills, and won the assault. They run away, they're marked as activated. Next turn I can immediately just charge back in. So it's one of those, like, understanding how to use assault to control your opponent's actions is going to help you just play better. A little bit of a tirade there. But anyway, Peacekeeper Defenders, like I said, they're kind of expensive at 100 model. Oh my gosh.
Surprise!
Little homie back here sneezing up a storm. Kind of expensive for 2 models, but I do think they're worth it. They have Resilient 1. Remember, Resilient does get shut off by AP3, but they're Armor 8. They have Countercharge, they have Controlled Fire, and they have Defensible. And Defensible allows you to Overwatch for free at the end of your activation. So I can move and shoot and then go into Overwatch. And that just means that they can effectively always Overwatch. Now, this isn't always the case. Obviously, if somebody hits you with a pin token, oh well. If you lose a melee, oh well. They come stock with Dominator rifles, and I'll say it again, some of the best all-around utility guns in the Army. They're fantastic. They can take one special weapon, an incinerator or a burst laser. They're both 5 points. I've told everybody how I feel here. I think the burst laser is just a better take for the points. I've had people tell me that incinerators are actually really good, and I'll probably give them a try. It's one of those, like, I'm just not in a rush to, because I've not been disappointed with the burst lasers. The volume, the pinning, it just feels more versatile to me. Being able to take them, and while the Forge Fathers, for example, have Headstrong, the fact that I can at least force them to roll a die before they interact, and they're Nerve 3, so they're just as likely to make Headstrong as they are to make the nerve check from the incinerator, and I don't have to be as close to use the incinerator or the burst laser. So I can throw pin tokens out on armies like Forge Fathers, even though they can shed them fairly easily. I can force them to roll dice. I can hand pin tokens out against elves. Elves are harder to hit, but they're easier to kill, so I get a higher volume of dice. Now, arguably, you could make the case that incinerators into elves are going to feel better just because you can't modify those hit rolls. But it's just one of those, like, cool, but they're probably making their nerve check too, and then I'm not handing out a pin token. So it's just one of those, to me, I just feel like the burst lasers are more versatile. The incinerators are probably better matchup specific, if that makes sense. I always feel like they should have another hit point. Because damn, them boys thick, and that's really just because I come from a 40k background where bigger models have more hit points, and this isn't the case in Firefight. And I'm not complaining. I'm not saying that they should have more hit points. Especially when I first started playing, I just really expected them to be a bit more durable with another hit point, and it just wasn't the case. And I had to just understand, like, these were unreasonable expectations set by me, not an issue with the game. And now that I've kind of figured out how they work and tempered those expectations, they perform a lot better for me, you know. But like I said, that's just one of those things where that's me. There's nothing wrong with the unit. I'm just like, man, these look big. They should have another hit point. They've got this big shield. That's another hit point. But what the shield actually does is send them to armor 8 and then also give them defensible. So there isn't an order that wouldn't benefit them. Now, they don't have trademark weapons, so there's a lot that they don't get access to. But if you've got the forward observer, 24-inch range dominators are fantastic. The extra movement from the assault captain is good. 9-inch movement on your infantry is really good. The peacekeeper aura is always good. Always good. Again, I don't mean to stress it, but that peacekeeper captain, there's a reason it's been in every list I've ever made for this game for my enforcers, and that's because it's just that good. Well, we're going to talk about heavy support. I think this is the last one, and then we'll kind of talk about them a little bit in terms of which ones I think are the best, which ones I think are the worst. I don't think there's a lot of clear-cut winners and losers in specialists. You know, I think because they're specialists, that makes it a little harder to rank them because you're ranking things that serve a different role. They're specialists. So the heavy support's a standard enforcer. Again, no controlled fire. I'm not sure if it's intentional or not, because this is, like I said, one of maybe 2-3 total units in the whole army that I've seen that don't have any kind of charge reaction, not including any kind of vehicles. But I think some of the vehicles do too, because like the Striders have them. I don't know about the Jet. I'd have to look. It's effectively 5 boys with missiles. You know, you can take the Genling laser on the Sergeant, but there's not really a reason to other than points. It only gives you 1 additional shot, and it's no AP. It is trademarked, so if you wanted to spend command points on it to buff that 1 rifle, you could. But we've already talked about that when we talked about the troops. If you're going to do that, just take a whole unit of them with Genlings and then just maximize the efficiency of your command points by going, okay, here's 10 shots with anti-vehicle and AP1. Here's this, here's that. So that's more my thinking on it, is if you have the points, it should have the missile. There's no reason not to. Again, I think the missiles are great. We talked about them a little bit earlier. It's 1 shot at AP4, anti-aircraft, anti-tank, devastating 2. Not devastating D2, and that's an important distinction. These are going to do 2 damage all the time. And targeting systems, again, you can split fire.
It's a bold strategy, Cotton. Let's see if it pays off for them.
The only reason I probably would is if I'm just trying to hand out pin tokens rather than actually damage things. And again, that's going to be kind of matchup specific. If I go into an army that has a lot of headstrong, I'm not so worried about the pin tokens when I could potentially just kill the thing with my missiles. But if it doesn't have a lot of headstrong, like if I've got a couple of tunnelers, for example, across the table from me, I might split fire just to hand out pin tokens to both those tunnelers to try to slow those down, because I know what they're about. You know, they're coming to bash butts and mix guts, as old TK says.
Nothing gets old TK ready to go like a good old-fashioned butt bashing, and that's just what we're here for.
They are high cost. They're about 200 points, 210 if you take the missile on the Sergeant. So you have to play them intelligently. You can't just kind of like, I'm going to leave them here and shoot things. And I think Go, 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 again, is probably your best friend here, because it allows you to pop out, shoot, and pop back. And it's just one of those where anything you can do with this unit that allows you to shoot and not get shot at, that's what you want to do. You know, obviously, if your opponent has like a plague mortar or something like that, if they're smart, that's what they're going to target right away. Oh, you've got missiles? I'm not playing with that. Let's get rid of those right now. The nice thing about the fact that they don't have counter charge is there's certain orders you don't have to worry about using on them. You know, you don't need them to go into Overwatch. You don't need them to activate late to maximize the potential for their controlled fire or their counter charge. You know, so if you've got a good shot, you can just take it and not have to worry about whether or not you're going to miss out on something. The extra range is cool, but like I said, they have 36-inch range. And then, hey, guess what? Peacekeeper Aura, real good for them. Way to fire and vicious, real good. If you've got an opponent who's playing a lot of short range and they can't really tag your missiles, then arguably, like, you're fine. You could just leave them out in the open for a turn or two, take some shots, and then start worrying about moving them. And they don't have to do damage to be effective. And that's another thing to keep in mind. And I could draw some parallels here. So when I did the Michigan GT, I had the Strider with the Polaris cannon. And we're going to talk about support next week. And I love, like, the Striders, hands down, some of my favorite units and even models in this army. Like, they're up there with the monocycles. A good example of deterrence being a viable strategy is I played Mason Labs round 3, and actually round 2, my game against Jordan. But round 3 really sticks out to me because that was the most, I don't want to say egregious, but that's the best word that comes to mind. It's the most egregious example I could think of, where I put the Strider down, he dumped a bunch of shooting into it, and none of it was really anti-tank, so a lot of it just bounced off because it's armor 7 with heavy armor, so I think he maybe did like a damage to it, and then I got to activate it. Like, I let him shoot a couple things into it because once the first volley went off and he didn't do anything, I was like, okay, I can let it sit there for one more volley. So I did. And then he shot at it again, didn't do any damage. So I was like, okay, I can let it sit there for one more volley. Because his anti-tank didn't have good lines on it at the time. So then I moved it up finally and just kind of had it behind a building in the middle of the board. And it was locking down big chunks because he just didn't want to take any of his bigger stuff out there, because that Polaris cannon is massive. Now, it's fairly short range, but it is 2 shots at AP4, and I think it's devastating D2+1 without looking with anti-tank. And if you give him the veteran pilot upgrade, which I did, it gives him marksman. So it's 4s re-rolling 1s. It was fantastic. And, you know, so it didn't have to do damage, and really it didn't do much that game. But its presence on the table help dictate the flow of the game. And that's what the missile launchers can do. If your opponent knows that you've got this thing that can reach almost all the way across the board, and it could delete a tank, or really just like cripple something unless it just has a ton of bodies, they're gonna respect it. And that's one of those things, like, again, that's a mindset I have because of Warhammer. You know, a lot of people would tell me how bad incubi are at the beginning of 10th. And I was just like, well, maybe, but I'm having success with them. But I'm going into it not with the expectation that they need to just kill everything they touch all the time. But I'm going into it with the expectation that if they're sitting in a transport or they're sitting behind a terrain feature, my opponent is going to respect the potential damage output and just give them kind of a wide berth. And they do. You know, my opponent's like, no, I know what those do. They hurt. You know, if your dice are good, I'm picking everything up. I don't want that. So they tend to avoid them. And that's kind of what I mean, is that's where the heavy supports, to me, that's where they shine, is not necessarily the damage that they do, but it's the damage that your opponent thinks they can do. So that's going to cover all the units. Like I said, it's going to be hard to rank them because these are specialists, and it's more just they perform a specific job. You know, they do a specific thing. So if I had to pick one to be the best, I think I would probably pick the heavy support. Yes, they are expensive, but there's a plethora of orders that benefit them. They have a good range, so they don't have to be up in anybody's face. This is an army that's very medium to short range, and this is one of the few things you have that can sit and shoot over halfway across the table. So they are a little bit expensive, but they give you a good threat deterrent, and they give you access to something that's really, really important in that it can just lock down shooting lanes. I would probably pick them as like my number one. Outside of that, Man, like I said, I don't know, because all the Pathfinder units. So I would probably put the Pathfinder units on the lower end of the scale. So what would be 2? We've got, let's see, heavy support. I'd probably put the Defenders at number 2, just because they have the ability to tank objectives a little bit better. They are also kind of expensive, but the Dominators are really good, and again, they can benefit from most auras, and that's really good. I'd probably put them at number 2. I don't really understand how this is a specialist unit. I don't know what they consider a specialty or specialization here. Maybe it's the defensive profile, like they're a tank as opposed to like a high aggro unit. The combat drone I'd probably put at 3. Normally I put Pathfinder stuff lower because it requires Pathfinders to really work. But even just the drone itself is a good vehicle. Like, it's got good guns. The array is useless without more Pathfinders, but at the same time, like, the tag cannon and the tag rifle are pretty good, and everything, like, it's just a solid take. I'd probably put that at 3. Jet bikes, I'd probably honestly put at 4. I might tie them at 3. The issue I have with the jet bikes is mostly that I'm kind of an idiot. And really, I just tend to kind of torpedo them up the board. They need patience. You need to kind of keep them in the back for as long as possible and use them for late game objective grabbing and stuff like that. And that's maybe why we put them at 3 or 4, because they require a bit more finesse to use. You know, they're not a unit that you could just put on the table and have it just instantly feel good. They're a unit that you're going to have to, like, think about how you want to use them, what you want their role to be, that type of thing. Let's see. I think probably all the drones and all the Pathfinder units just kind of get lumped into the same category. The Enforcer drones, like I said, they're good, they're cheap, but again, it's not a unit that you could just put on the table and be like, this unit's good, it does what I need it to do. You have to have a predefined role for it and understand how you want it to interact and how you want it to work. And then again, most of the other Pathfinder stuff, it just kind of needs other Pathfinders to really function at its best, which is why I never put Pathfinders at the top, not because they're bad, but because they require more Pathfinders. Like, they require list tailoring in order to really use them effectively. Thanks for watching. That'll wrap us up. Next episode, we're going to talk about the support units, so like the Striders and stuff like that. I am also working on a Veerman series that's going to follow a similar structure. We're going to be working with some of the members of the community to take deep dives into some of the other factions, so look forward to maybe some, me chatting with other people rather than just me talking and you hopefully listening. And then, I am also working on a Q&A so we can do a deep dive into some of the rules and stuff like that. I've put it on the Firefight Fanatics Facebook page, but if you have any questions that you want to ask, if you had access to the Rules Committee, which is a group of volunteers who kind of work with Mantic to help understand and fix and interpret rules, if you had access to them, what questions would you ask? Feel free to drop those in the comments. Thanks a lot. I hope everybody has a great day, and we'll catch you later.